Hello and welcome to another special and somewhat short notice Auto Talk live stream. Now, joining me today is David Vinsen, the Chief Executive Officer of VIA. Thanks for joining us, David.
Good afternoon, Richard, and everybody.
Now, just as I kind of briefed David on this prior, we'll probably just take it easy for the first minute or so. Just usually we have a few more people come in the door as things start to wind up. So I'll run through a little bit of housekeeping. We highly encourage people to comment and ask questions through whichever platform you're watching, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. We can see your comments and questions and really do appreciate them. And also, if you've got any colleagues around that you think should be watching this, don't forget to fire them the link now. It would be great to have more people along. And this will stay live on all our platforms, so Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, as I said, after this, and we'll also pop it up on our website. Be aware that because we're live streaming on multiple platforms, you won't actually necessarily see the other comments and questions or viewers that are out there, because if you're on LinkedIn, you're not seeing YouTube, so on and so forth, just the way these things work. But we really do appreciate that you've come along. And if you do have any questions that you don't think are getting through, you can flick me an email, richard@automediagroup.co.nz, and I will monitor those. Now, I'd like to thank you again for joining David. Now, David is in a little bit of a remote location, so hopefully his connection stays stable, but if it doesn't, just please hang on in there. And the same with if you're watching this, if the connection goes a little bit funny, just stay on the live stream. It will come right eventually. So let's kick on with what we're here to discuss today. And I'm going to run through probably quite an overview of this first before we speak to David, just so we're kind of all on the same page. We are here to talk about the government's Clean Car Program. Now, when we say Clean Car Program, that covers across both the discount and the standard. So the discount being what I guess is more commonly known as the fee-based scheme, and the standard being the requirement for distributors and importers next year to measure their CO2 output of their vehicles across the fleet they sell in that year, and have that balanced to a certain level, otherwise the need to pay penalties on those. So those are the terms we're going to try and stick with today, just so we're all, it can get a little bit confusing around that. We'll try and keep that in line. Now, we do have a statement from Minister Wood following yesterday, which we'll come to soon. He was not invited to join the stream. We just didn't have the time technically to sort that out, but we will extend an invite to him to do a similar stream in the near future. And he has actually done a podcast / video like this with us before, discussing the Clean Car Plan, so hopefully he'll do it again. So if we cut on to the news that came out yesterday, and I'm pulling this from autotalk.co.nz, of course, the great source of automotive industry news. VIA has announced that it is withdrawing support for the government's Clean Car Program, citing ongoing failure in the implementation of the Clean Car discount as the driver behind the move. In this statement, the association noted it continues to support the stated goal of the Clean Car efforts to reduce carbon emissions and incentivise the transition to a carbon-neutral transport system. However, they say the system itself was not appropriate for our supply chain, and it definitely seems to be causing some issues out there. Now, if I quickly run through the list of issues that they do have with the scheme, and this is a little bit lengthy, but it's important we get this out here first. Application of flawed safety regime to eligibility to Clean Car Program subsidies that unfairly disadvantages light, efficient used imports. Unequal and unfair treatment of PHEVs depending on whether imported by a parallel importer or OEM-sponsored importer. Redesign of the used vehicle penalty scheme that is unfair and counter to previous agreements and first principle design justifications of the program. Use of unladen weight as opposed to tier weight without consultation or justification. Incomplete vehicle data coupled with an unwillingness to work with parallel importers to accept vehicle data. The inability to accurately identify vehicles consistently. A supplemental data rule, vehicle efficiency and emissions data, VEED 2022, that prioritises the deflection of liability over the proposed provision of accurate data. The willingness to knowingly use flawed data in calculating fee baits. Deflection or denial of responsibility for known errors in vehicle data in the application of that vehicle data, failure to communicate known issues with industry and the public, failure to provide appropriate communication channels or timeframes for resolving data issues, unwillingness to recognise parallel importers as responsible agents for the goods they import, unfair treatment of parallel importers versus OEM-sponsored importers in the application of the VIA in general, unequal treatment of functionally new vehicles, and the failure to provide the industry with a letter of indemnity for knowingly allowing the government to misrepresent vehicle emissions and mischarge car buyers through the application of flawed or unfairly applied data. Now, there's a lot there, David, but if I was to summarise, essentially VIA is suggesting that, you know, the fee-bait has so many issues with it. How can we continue on to a far bigger system when we've got, you know, this, we're kind of broken at the first stage? Is that a very one-line summary?
Yeah, that's fair. And it's not just about how can we continue on. It's about the next stage is going to double down on all of this. So it's going to double up the incentives, in essence, double the penalties. And we've already seen that despite the best intentions, that the system itself is flawed. So at the moment, it's the consumers who are being penalised, and dealers are observing that and being inconvenienced by it. But come 1st of January next year, it's the trade who are going to be in the gun. We're the people who are going to be suffering from this flawed scheme.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, how much of a fix do you think is there for this early stuff? You know, the Nzta and the minister are both, and we can come to the statement from the minister in a moment, somewhat downplayed the issues. Statistically, they've indicated they're small, but I mean, there's two aspects to that. It's that, I guess, is that while they say they're small, they are leaving. I mean, I know in some cases that we've reported on Auto Talk, leaving dealers with basically unsaleable cars because they bought stuff thinking it had one a figure attached to it for a fee or whatever, and it's ended up with one that's far larger. These may be statistically small, but they're quite big for the dealers that are suffering from them, aren't they?
That's exactly right. And the quantum, the number of issues that the minister is informed of, are the ones that Nzta deal with. They don't deal with a lot of stuff because it doesn't get to them. It's dealt with by their website subcontractor, and those things don't filter through. And so they're not seeing the multiplicity of problems. All they see is all they're reporting on is the ones that they have fixed.
Mm-hmm. If we just, so we can be on the right page, I'm just going to run through a few key points of the minister's statement that he made to Auto Talk late last night. In a response, he acknowledged that there are teething issues with the discount. As with any new policy, there have been some teething issues with implementation. Of the cases brought to Waka Kotahi's attention for investigation between April 1 and June 30, 2022, only 44 required a correction. In addition, Waka Kotahi is undertaking an ongoing proactive audit of the scheme, which has identified a further 36 that required a correction. He downplayed and this is in my commentary, he downplayed them in the context of the number of vehicles sold with discounts. To quote, however, it's important that these issues are seen in the wider context. In its first year, the Clean Car discount has proven a huge success with more than 57,000 light electric and non-plug-in hybrid vehicles registered, resulting in significant emission reductions across cars coming into New Zealand. It has also clearly influenced importers of vehicles who in many cases have been importing low-emitting vehicles into the New Zealand market to meet demand. This is the scheme working as it is meant to clean up our fleet. I continue to engage with VIA and have asked senior officials at Waka Kotahi to commence an assessment of the concerns they have raised to determine if we can iron out any remaining obstacles. So just on that, do you believe the Minister's coverage there of what the errors are, or the statistical numbers of what the errors are, do you think that's valid, or do you think he's missed the numbers there, or what's your take on it?
No, just to go back to my previous point, those are the numbers of vehicles which have been rectified or are being investigated by Nzta. But the reality is probably everybody on this broadcast knows, on this presentation knows, there are far more than that. And it's not a case of model by model or variant by variant, it's individual vehicles. And so some of these vehicles, as you alluded to, they're sale-proof. We buy them expecting to be able to, when I say we, I'm talking about the industry, we buy them expecting to get qualified for a certain incentive, and then we find that it doesn't. So there are all sorts of problems, and this issue hasn't, our decision this week hasn't just come out of the blue. We took a decision last year, as you know, to support the government's initiative And we didn't do that lightly. That came as the result of a presentation, debate, survey, and then a vote. And we decided to support the initiative with the intention of having a seat at the table, so to speak, so that we could influence as much as possible the way it was developed and finally implemented. And with the best will in the world, that hasn't been the case. We've thrown significant resource at it, we the industry, with a lot of key industry players giving their time free of charge to Nzta to try to iron these issues out. And to be fair, Nzta have put a very good team of people on the case, but to a degree, they have been downgrading the extent of the problem. And I think the real issue is there are two causes to this, a lot of sub-causes, but one of them is an incomplete database that Nzta worked to, and the haste with which this program was launched. It's, to be fair, when the minister suddenly announced incentives in the middle of last year, no one was ready for it. Not us, not MOT, not Nzta, no one. And then over the next few months, they had to scramble to put together the penalty part of the program, which started this year. And that just exacerbated the problem. So we've got stuck in and tried to help. And I think Nzta have worked with good spirit, but they are a bureaucracy dealing with an industry. And there's a natural dynamic tension between that. We want instant answers. I mean, when we're trying to sell a vehicle, it's either yes, no, do the deal, or you don't. With the bureaucracy, things take a long time. We've been told by two officials recently that things take a long time here in their respective departments. We know that, but this has dragged on for a long time. So we've put in requests to the minister to discuss this. I had discussions with him on Sunday night, and on Sunday evening I also had discussions with some of his senior officials. And to be fair, they have thrown significant resource at it to review stuff. The minister he asked me what we would like, and I gave him on Sunday night, I gave him a number of points, and I said the first thing is he should kick some ass. Exactly that. The second thing is there are a couple of officials who I named who I thought should be appointed to get to the bottom of this. And then I felt that he should summon myself and David Crawford from the MIA to his office to discuss the ongoing issues and the likely issues to come up. And the last thing, and I think probably the most major, is that they should defer the implementation of the clean car standard. Yeah, he said the delay of that standard was probably not likely to happen, but he did give an undertaking that the other things that he would do. And to be fair, there's been a flurry of activity this week with officials. So we've had meetings with officials, senior officials, one of whom I'd never met before from Nzta. He's come in with a clean pair of eyes, and they've undertaken to look at the issues that we have raised. And I understand that since the media release went out, that the minister has put further pressure or a further request or instruction to officials to address the issues which we have raised. It's a sad state that it's come to this stage. We had to take this decision. So we supported the initiative last year in good faith, but we have found that we can no longer be complicit when we can see we're not making any headway in getting improvement, and we've got the clean car standard, the implementation of that, looming ever closer. And as an example, we haven't yet seen the regulations for the clean car standard. So we don't know what's in them. And yet we, collectively, the industry, new and used, are expected to put in place data collection and reporting systems to meet the regulations, which we haven't yet seen. And just on that basis, so we don't know what we're doing, they don't know what they're doing, and Nzta's got to implement it. It's a very difficult situation, and we can no longer be complicit in it. Having said that, we have given an undertaking that we are prepared to continue to use our best efforts to try to smooth these problems out, but we don't want the rush of being part of the problem. We're very happy to be part of the solution, but we don't want to be part of the problem.
You said just on that point there, did you have any tension with some elements of your membership or the industry in regards to your support of the Clean Car program? I mean, was that ever a debate, or was it always a clear support it from within the VIA ranks?
It was a vigorous debate. It was a presentation, a discussion, a survey, a debate, and then a vote. And there were some dissenting opinions. They did not want us to see us lining up and supporting a project or a proposal that they didn't agree with. But on balance, a vast majority said, no, we should take that seat at the table. We should do everything we can to support this. And the underlying reason for that is that this is inevitable. It was going to happen anyway. So we didn't want to be standing in the way of it. We wanted to be trying to influence how it was implemented. So I still think that was a very good decision to take at the time. And we're not flip-flopping now. We're just now reviewing the situation in light of our experience over the last 8 months.
Where do you believe the issues lie within the system, and I'll say Wellington as a representation of the government? I mean, is this an issue at the minister's end? Is it in the ministry end? Is it at the Nzta? The Nzta is kind of the one holding the can at the moment. Where do you think the problems lie in regards to getting these things finalised and tidied up?
At base, my personal opinion is the problem is political, that they were determined to rush this out and get it in place. The Prime Minister was travelling to a climate change conference and wanted to be able to announce that we had fuel economy standards in New Zealand. We had introduced fuel economy standards. So they were introduced, the legislation was introduced with a hiss and a roar, with incomplete consultation and incomplete preparation. We said at the time, we, New and Used, said we hadn't had enough time to consult and develop proper databases and principles and procedures. And this is with the Ministry of Transport who developed the policy. And then it was dumped on Nzta, and they were said, go make it happen, boys. And they've really struggled hard to do it, including engaging a senior member of the used vehicle industry to give them advice on where they're having problems. So they've got a very experienced importer and dealer working with them to give them advice. Plus, they've got the benefit of this working group of people that the industry has put together who've made a fantastic contribution. But I think if you spoke to any of them, they would express frustration at how things... So we raise issues, they're acknowledged, and then nothing happens, which is part of the...
My read on it has been, and this may be wrong, but the ministry has generally been, on both this and the discount and the standard, have been kind of giving the Nzta very little time at the end of each process to put together what is some pretty substantial systems.
That's exactly right. So the ministry developed the policy, and they write the legislation and they do the initial consultation, all of that sort of stuff, and they're driven by the minister or the political will, and then Nzta have to make it work. So they've got to develop all the systems and procedures, and they've had very little time to do it. You're right. And I don't think there's tension there. That's just the way things are, that the ministry is the ministry and the agency is the agency, which is designed to deal with these issues at a lower level.
The MIA pulled its support in part late last year. Was that something that you guys thought about at that point as well? Or, I mean, you guys have different issues. And just, I got a quote from David Crawford of the MIA yesterday saying, we have some sympathy for their point of view. If the issues are not sorted out for the clean car discount, this is only going to be compounded under the standard. So, I mean, pretty much in line with what you guys are saying now. Does both of you pulling out make a big difference?
No, we're aligned on those things. It's just that we took a different political posture. I mean, the MIA didn't pull out. They just did not throw their support behind the initiative. And we decided on balance we would do that, and we would give it a really good crack to make it work. And David Crawford and the MIA, they expressed their reservations right from the start. So we've now gone down a different track with giving it a good shot. And now we've decided, we now need to not be seen to be endorsing this initiative. And as the Minister said last night and again today, and as we have said, we will continue to work with him and his officials to try to make it work. But we're no longer endorsing it.
Yes. Now,
I mean,
just a little house.
just to go back to core principles. You said, what is the real issue? And I said it's about political. It's probably deeper than that, and that is that the Climate Change Commission has said that we have an emissions trading scheme in New Zealand, which is the overarching scheme for greenhouse gas emissions, and that ETS should be the primary tool that respective governments use to affect their policies. And here we are, we've got the ETS happening, which is going to be carbon tax on fuels and all the rest of it. And on top of that, we've got this other layer of bureaucracy designed to influence consumer behaviour and dealer behaviour on top of the base ETS. It was an unnecessary level of complexity.
Even if we get past that, look, not necessarily that the industry would be happy about it, but if the system simply worked and we had the regulation for the standard sitting on your desk now, we wouldn't be at this point, would we? We'd be moving forward, not happy, but in a proactive way, I guess.
If we had, we're running out of time now anyway, but if we had the regulation or even a draft regulation for the standard on our desks, working on it, that would be a big step forward. The next step forward is we had a comprehensive, valid database of the emission values and other characteristics of vehicles. If we had that and Nzta accepted it, that would be a huge step forward. A lot of the other things would be the teething problems that the Minister referred to. Things like when you have a problem with a vehicle that you want to challenge, there's a proper procedure for doing that. Not just send someone an email and have it go into a black hole and it might get answered in 4 or 5 weeks, by which time the sale of that vehicle is well and truly lost and it just becomes another unsaleable vehicle on someone's yard.
Mm-hmm. Right, now, just a little housekeeping. We are starting to get near the end of this discussion, so if you do have any questions, please do ask them now. We've got a couple there that we'll get to in a moment, but let's start to get those questions through. If you do have any, we may have covered them for you, in which case that's great, we'll have that. Now, you guys use a interesting term in your statements. I believe you say carbon theft. Is that the term you're using?
That's the term that we've heard. We've heard that
right.
Some dealers are saying it's tantamount to carbon theft, where the government is going ahead and charging penalties or not giving the correct discount based on inaccurate data. And the consumer is being penalised for that. In effect, they are having their carbon credits stolen from them. They should be getting these credits and having them cashed up by way of a decent discount or a smaller penalty, and they're not. So we've had cases where members have sold a car, and the expectation is that it's going to get an incentive of a certain amount, and when the vehicle is registered, the customer finds that the incentive is nowhere near that amount, or in fact even gets a penalty. And the dealers are getting blamed for misleading behaviour. And if we weren't acting on a government database, I believe that we would be accused and perhaps even guilty of misrepresentation under the Fair Trading Act.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I suspect we'll see a few cases like this popping up in the tribunal at some point in the near future.
Well, we are indemnified.
Yes.
We are indemnified. Okay. We're working on a government database, and we have to act as though that's true, even if we know it's not. And the government, to quote the Prime Minister, she's the basis of all truth.
Now, we don't understand what it is you want out of this. What do you actually think you're going to get? I mean, do you think you're actually going to see real action on fixing these issues? And do you believe there is a chance of the standard being delayed or not at all?
The realpolitik dictates, I don't think, when I say realpolitik, I mean the reality of the situation. I don't think the Minister is of a mind to delay the standard. He would rather ram it through and deal with the pieces as they fall out rather than try to fix things in advance. So I don't think it's going to be delayed, although we're going to have a good shot at that in conjunction with the MIA. I do think there's going to be increased pressure on the officials, both at MOT and in Nzta, to smooth these things out, the problems out, as quickly as they possibly can. And in fact, right as we speak, Nzta are dispatching their implementation team around the country to talk with some key dealers, particularly those who've raised complaints and concerns, to deal with them in the field, on their own yards and in their own premises. So we are getting some action.
Okay. Chance of the standard being delayed?
Like I've said, I don't think it's going to happen. I really don't. I'd love it to happen, but I don't think it's going to happen. I have another meeting with the Minister and his Clean Car Standard group, which is this leadership group, on Monday the 8th. So these issues will be canvassed, and we've requested a report. So that's quite a high-powered group, and that group is going to request a report from Nzta on how the implementation is going.
Okay. Now, we'll run through a couple of questions here. Again, if you do have any last-minute questions, please just chuck them in there in the comments. Now, from Rishi Bubna, apologies if I got that name wrong. How can we have the cost for statement of emissions reimbursed for the vehicles that Nzta does not have the correct data for? Because it's unfair for us to pay to have that data corrected when it should, in fact, be the Nzta's obligation.
There are two issues there. One of them is paying to have the data corrected, and then the second one is to recover the unfair penalties or inadequate incentives. Two entirely separate things. And this is what I said. Richie's question is dead right. That is one of the reasons that we have become so frustrated. There is no mechanism for undoing a wrong. Either the cost of undoing it or the compensation for the inaccuracy.
Is that something you'll be raising with the working group or with the Nzta?
We have raised that, and they've just said once it's registered, it's a done deal. So as an example, when the clean car discount first came in and they talked about incentives for all of those EVs, we know of dealers who had 10 and 15 and 20 sales lined up, waiting that announcement, and they went and registered all the cars, which meant before they'd sold them, which meant they didn't qualify for discounts. Now, we had to take action to get those unwound, but I don't think it would happen again.
Okay. Now, Todd Hunter says, David, doesn't VIA need to publish the actual number of problems to counter the minister's downplaying of the problems? Is this even possible? Before you answer, David, my interesting thing there as well, they've said, there's 44 vehicles or whatever that need corrections. I think they tend to forget that that's just the model, or it doesn't necessarily mean that number of vehicles. So, for example, I know the vehicle we raised in Auto Talk recently was a Mazda Excella 1.6 or something like that. Well, there might be 150, 200 of those a month coming into the country, and all of them are going to face the incorrect subsidy, aren't they?
Yes, that's right. And Todd is quite right. It'd be really lovely to have that information, but it comes in, no one's aggregating it, unless it is Nzta's website contractor who field the initial inquiry. So Nzta are only seeing the tip of the iceberg. And the example you gave, Richard, about the Excellas, so you might have 150 coming in a month, but worse still, you've got two of them sitting on the yard side by side, and one gets an incentive and one doesn't, depending on on what information is available in the database. That's exactly the problem. I mean, there are other issues as well, like the difference between a parallel imported new vehicle and a OEM imported new vehicle. As an example, a Leaf, if an OEM distributor brings it in, $8,625 incentive, and if we bring a brand new Leaf in, $3,450, less than half. And so it goes, those sorts of disparities. And people see, as an example, Nissan Leaf, buy a Nissan Leaf, you get $8,625 off the purchase price. And they rush in and buy a new parallel imported Leaf, and they only get $3,450. And they think the dealer is tricking them.
I think in that example there too, one of the things the minister I think needs to click onto is that the systems actually almost work too well, and that people really do want those incentives, as people would. And from what I'm hearing from dealers out there, a lot of cars, particularly at that smaller end, where they don't have a rebate, or they end up with a small penalty, they become pretty much sale-proof. It's kind of the effect on the public has been stronger, I suspect, than what they expect, and that exacerbates those errors. I think that's probably a fair way of looking at it.
That's right, and the financial numbers show that the government has spent, I think, the thick end of 100 mil on incentives, encouraging people to buy these low emissions and EVs, and they're recovering by way of the penalties about 16 mil. So they're 84 mil out the back door. So in other words,
well, hang on. Autotalk was the first to actually run those figures properly. I honestly don't have them in front of me. I'm sorry, but that's $100 million over 8 or 9 months versus $60 million over 3 months. If you actually take it back down to the 3 months only when they're both operating, the gap's only about $10 million, and that needs to also be balanced out for the fact that people registered a lot of fee-paying stuff before the system started, and they held off to register a whole pile of rebate collecting stuff until after the fee bait did. The balance isn't as big as that story that's been put out by some things actually suggests.
No, that's fair comment, but it also turns on the political will, where the government could dish out incentives starting in the middle of last year without any act of parliament, because they can dish out our money as freely as they like, but they can't increase the taxes without an act of parliament or regulation. So they had to wait until they got the regulation in place. So there was naturally a gap, and they always expected to front-end load the system. But even so, there is a disparity, which talks to your point, that it's been almost too successful.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what the disparity is in the fourth quarter of this year when the market trickery of pre-registration and holding off registration finally settles down a little. Let's move on to the next question. Frank Willett. Actually, it's, to quote, government-endorsed theft where a rebate is less than it should be or a penalty is more than it shouldn't be, isn't it? I think he's trying to rewrite the term.
So, what was the question again, Richard? Can you repeat?
I think Frank's referring to the term of carbon theft. And he says, actually, it's government-endorsed theft, where a rebate is less than it should be, or a penalty is more than it shouldn't be, isn't it?
That's exactly right. That is the point that we made, is that the government is guilty of carbon theft. It's the government that's guilty of it because they're not allowing the correct values for the vehicles that people are buying, and they're either paying too much of a penalty or not getting enough of incentive. Frank is exactly right. It is carbon theft by the government, and they don't mind. They just want to drive this thing through.
Right. So I think that's about it for now. Is there anything else you want to add before we wind up, David?
No, but thank you for the opportunity to discuss this, and thank you for industry members who've participated and are sitting in, because it is a complicated issue, particularly with a two-phase exercise, and the phase is broken into two. So we had the clean car discount started with the incentives, and then the clean car discount with the penalties, and then next year we've got the standard, which is going to affect us. But the latest thing, which we haven't really discussed yet, the latest thing we hear is that instead of the clean car standard penalties being collected at the time of import, they're going to be charged at the time of registration, just as the same as the discount is, which means that the whole thing is going to double up and the customers are going to get really hit at the time of registration.
Interesting. I will definitely do some more digging on that and find out why that seems to be changing as part of the process. I imagine that would only be for the importers as opposed to the those who've been recognised as a distributor, as an OEM.
Yeah, but importers, parallel importers can do the same thing. They can register so that they can do their bulk issues. But that's right. For those people who are bringing in vehicles, vehicle by vehicle, it's going to double up, and customers are going to have to pay a double whammy at the time of initial registration.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. Well, that's interesting news. We'll stick to Autotalk, and we'll have coverage on that as we work out what's going on there, or as the government finally works out what's going on there as we go along. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget, wherever you're watching, to subscribe to that channel so when we do more of these in the future that you can see more. Don't forget, the one we're building at the moment so that we can do them through that is the Autotalk LinkedIn page. So please go and follow that page so we have more in the future through there rather than it still being on my LinkedIn page as it is in the morning. Also, tomorrow morning we will have our usual Autotalk weekly wrap. Graham McDonald and probably a special guest tomorrow because Matthew's off at a launch. will be on there, and no doubt this will be a big topic of discussion on that live stream as well. So thank you again. Thank you for watching. Thank you, David Vinsen from VIA, for joining us, and we will see everyone hopefully soon on another stream.